I know the name, but I can't quite place the face. Here's a look at the Mattel He-Man in the Master Universe cartoon collection, Many Faces, Heroic Human, Robot, and Monster. This Master Universe Origins Many-Face figure from the cartoon collection is inspired by his original He-Man and Master Universe TV episodes from the 80s. The many-faced heroic warriors designed at 5.5-inch scale, with a vintage look but with modern posability of 16 movable joints. The many-faced Motu toy comes with his signature rotatable face looming out of a helmeted harness and is inspired by the episode The Mystery of Many Faces, in which his origin story is told. A mini-comic is included for story context. I think before we see the action features that this actor has, let's grab the tape measure first and see how tall the cartoon collection Many Faces actually stands. Don't worry. I'll also bring in some other cartoon collection figures in a moment. But first, though, the tape measure is going to tell us that Many Faces stands exactly 6 inches in height, translating, though, to a figure that's 15 centimeters tall. As promsies, here's what the figure looks like with the cartoon collection, both He-Man and Teela, who he owes a bit of thanks to actually both. If you've also seen as well The Mystery of Many Faces, apparently Man-at-Arms missed the whole thing completely and Orko had to tell the story again. Here's also what he looks like with Ram Man. And over here as well we can bring in Stratos. We're filling out the room quite quickly. Here's also what he looks like also with Prince Adam. Here's also, if I didn't drop him over here, here's what he also looks like with Cringer. And of course we also have to as well bring in the Origins version of him so you can see the differences there too. Unfortunately, this turkey arrives without its trimmings, as Many Faces doesn't include any weapons or episode-specific accessories either. What he does have, though, is one thing I'm going to be throwing out right away. The figure comes included with a pamphlet. Unfortunately, it's not a case this time around where you can simply just pop the head off from the shoulders and just replace it around. When you take this, you have to take this as well. That's a whole lot of taking, and I don't think I really want to do that with the risk that I could potentially break it. Of course, you can remove the shoulders. You can also as well detach the lower half of his body, and you can remove his boots. Many Faces booties. Let's put that off to the side. The figure, though, also comes included with the mini-comic. The first time so far on this channel, we've looked at Slime Lord. Slime Lord. Part 2 of Horde Invasion. Feature, of course, Hordak there on the front. Doesn't look like, it doesn't look like Triclops is doing all that well. Looks like he's completely covered in ooze. Advertised, though, on the back is Many Faces and 2 other characters we are still going to be looking at, Hordak and Triclops. Stay tuned for those reviews. Flipping inside, stop that. Flipping inside the booklet, the animation or the art style is still good. Teela doesn't look like she's all that thrilled to be there. It looks like she's partially awake. Maybe Teela needs some Eternian coffee. I don't know. Though you can see down below, Many Faces, while having his robot face, does come included with a blaster. The figure, I will tell you, though, doesn't include anything other than this. And the thing I threw over there. So we get ourselves like a little mini comic, of course. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about that. There is also Leech. I'm sure we are going to be getting a Leech at some point. Modulok. Is that Modulok? I think that's Modulok. Really nice looking comic. Again, that will go very nicely with the rest of my mini comics. I'm just going to put that over there for right now. Putting it at least in a place where I know I'm not going to forget it. Now, unfortunately, again, it seems that Mattel has forgotten any accessories at all with Many Faces. And I maybe feel the reason why they chose not to include things was just because there's additional tooling and some engineering, I suppose, that's required for Many Faces' face. Still, though, I feel like you could have included something, at the very least his blaster, because Many Faces does have the same gripping hand style as He-Man, but he doesn't have anything for him to wield. So how unexciting will this be at the end of this review, where I have this guy rotating on the rotisserie, and I don't have anything in his hand, I can't make him in a dynamic pose. I guess I could kind of just do like some weird, I don't know. Leave it with me, we'll come up with something. Obviously, the sell of this is the fact that Many Faces does have a rotating face. I wanted to start with sort of the regular face here. In The Mystery of Many Faces, actually is an actor, and kind of funny, though, that they could have included like the Beastman head or maybe like the Skeletor head. I don't really know how that would have necessarily worked, because I know everything here is sort of self-contained, but he, at one point, also it transforms into Orko, which I thought was kind of funny as well. The whole sell of this, though, is the fact that the top of his disc here rotates. I will say, though, it's not the most responsive. You can rotate his face easily enough, so that's what he looks like. I would say the most heroic Many Faces face. Of course, he also transforms or rotates to a robot and a monster. When you rotate his head, though, I've noticed, though, that it almost seems like the disc wants to rotate on its own. Like, even if you just wiggle it on its own, it just seems like it's a little on the looser side. Still, though, when you are turning it, it feels like you almost have to turn a little bit more to get the full rotation. There's his robot face. Pretty neat. And he also, of course, has his monster face. which we see really a lot in that episode. Because it's also sitting so far back like this, I feel like it casts a lot of unnecessary shadow on his face. I know they had to do a lot for that because there's no way that you'd be able to have the face closer to the front because there's no way his head would be able to rotate. It's pretty self-contained as it would look in the cartoon. Just again, like it kind of bothers me a little bit that the disc seems a little loose, a little loosey-goosey here. The rest of his body is good, though. I mean, we can bring in the original Origins many faces so you guys can see. There's quite, though, a much yellow jaundice look to the Origins many faces, a much more flesh tone look for the cartoon look. He also has a very similar style of armor here. I've went back and looked at the episode again, and it seems for the most part like it's pretty accurate. Unfortunately, though, one of the problems with many faces is that they're using a blue body, and they're basically just spraying very loudly, apparently, airbrushing. They're adding the flesh tone over top of it. So some of the areas you can kind of see, it looks like you can probably still make out that there's blue bleeding plastic underneath it. Also, there's some areas, too, where you can see, like, the elbow joint, where there's the blue of the plastic kind of sticking out on the sides. I mean, it's sort of one of those unavoidable things. Maybe they could have used, like, the flesh tone plastic and then just painted the blue over top of it. That almost makes, like, it makes more sense. But I guess maybe it would have been a lot easier just to... Because, like, looking at this, it does look like they've painted the flesh over top of the blue. And yet, though, it just seems like it would have made more sense that they just had painted the blue over top of the skin. Does anybody really care? Nobody really cares. Maybe you should care, though, that the skin or the flesh tone here for his torso isn't quite jiving, though, with the coloring that they use for his arms. The lower legs are pretty much also the same. The blue looks okay. I feel like it's a little too shiny, but, I mean, that's a small little nitpick. For the most part, it looks very good, like Many Faces. Many Faces is also one of my favorite characters, also from the Master Universe. So, like, getting a cartoon collection of him is super exciting for me. At one point, though, I had the original vintage Many Faces. I don't have him anymore. I think I still have him, and he's just been lost over time. The closest thing, of course, I have to that is the Origins version. So again, like you can see, there's a lot of very similar traits here. He doesn't have, obviously, some of the pattern work or the additional purple he's got down below here, nor on his trunks, nor on the tops of his thighs. But like the cartoon version of him never had that either. For the articulation, though, for Many Faces, I know we've already kind of digested the idea that you can rotate his head, but it's not, again, the most responsive. Just as I feel like I'm rotating, I feel like I have to turn it a couple more times past the point of just rotating it on its own. It just doesn't seem like this is super responsive. The head also doesn't rotate, unfortunately. That's one thing, though, at least this version of Many Faces, you could actually still turn his head. You could still turn the disc, but you could also rotate his head, too. This Many Faces, unfortunately, has to pull a Michael Keaton, as every time he turns, he has to turn his head, or he turns his waist as well. I mean, like, if they had kept this as a separate piece, I know, unfortunately, this has to connect here, but, like, had they put maybe a line right there, just right there, kept this to the lower half of his abdomen, or the lower part of his torso, and kept this to the top of his head, then at least you'd be able to rotate his head, but unfortunately, you can't do that. Does this still count as articulation? Okay, we'll count that as well. Arms rotate, yeah, all the way around. You can hinge them out here. Single bend only in the elbow. I hate to be the bearer of the bad news. Arms rotate there also back and forth. The hands rotate also all the way around, and there's a hinge back and forth there. The waist swivels. And again, for all intents and purposes, I guess you could yank the arms off if you want to. And then you'd have to just take this entire apparatus off. I mean, I don't know really why you'd want to even take it off anyways. I mean, you'd have to take this off and put it on like another He-Man. Essentially, wouldn't it just look like Many Faces anyways? Anyways, let's just go ahead and pop his arm back in place here. There we go. Again, he's got the waist swivel. That's all he's going to be getting. Ball joints, though, to the tops of his legs. You can bring the legs certainly forward. Yes, of course, you can also bring them back as well. A little bit of a swivel there at the top. Single hinge only for the knees. A little bit of a rotation. I noticed, though, on mine, it's a little loose down below here. Also, it's kind of interesting, too, is that he has a rotation here, but he also has a rotation here for the boots. It almost just kind of seems like, why would you put a swivel here if there's already a swivel just like it's just the next door neighbor to that? I mean, he's already swiveling. He's like, Charlie, I've already got this. I'm already swiveling over here. And yet the neighbor feels he has to do that too. Ankle rocker back and forth. Or I should say ankle pivots. Ankle rocker. And of course, Many Faces does have the pegs on the bottoms of his feet. It's disappointing, though, that Many Faces, as good of a figure as he is, doesn't come included with any accessories. That with all the other figures up to this point, I mean, has there been a figure yet that we've gotten that hasn't come included with any accessories? I mean, when you get characters like Man-at-Arms, I think Man-at-Arms came in fact included with 2. Of course, He-Man came included with accessories. There is yet to be a figure, as far as I know, that hasn't had anything. I mean, even the likes of Ram-Man. Ram-Man's got a lot more new tooling that has to go in, obviously, to his body. So he even came included with a lot of accessories, too. And yet, unfortunately, though, Ram-Man gets left off the list. It's still a nice-looking figure, and being that Many Faces is certainly one of my favorite of the Motu line, To get the cartoon collection of him now is well welcomed. For the while, obviously the only one I really had in my collection up to the one, other than the one I still don't know, where did I put that other many faces from the 80s? I still have him. I feel like I still have him sitting in a tote somewhere. Right now he's crying for help inside the tote. I'm here! I'm here! I'm running out of oxygen. But still, though, we have ourselves the Origins version of Many Faces. The cartoon collection certainly does have a lot more color-accurate colors. It's a nice figure. He just really needed some accessories, though. Actually, come to think of it, at the very end of Mystery of Many Faces does get a round of applause from his audience watching his performance. He gets a flower, and he also gets himself a yellow cape. So I think either one of those accessories, or both those accessories for that matter, Mattel, could have easily been included with the figure. Does anybody have any interest to have a Many Faces displayed on their shelf with a big yellow cape? No. No, it's a stupid idea. I agree as well. But at the very least, they could have included his blaster. The Many Faces from the Origins release did the exact same thing articulation-wise. In fact, he does one thing more than this guy could do. He can't even rotate his head. The Origins version could. So that version of Many Faces did in fact come included with a blaster. Why couldn't the same have been done for the cartoon release of him? Other than being the only one that stands out like a sore thumb with no accessories in his pack, Many Faces still is a nice looking figure. There still has that issue though when you're covering anything really over top of a dark plastic like blue. It just happens, unfortunately, to be a flesh tone that it does mean that some of the blue does bleed through. That I have to feel, though, it would have worked better if they had done the other thing around. Instead of just molding it in blue plastic, would it have not just made more sense to mold it in the flesh plastic and then just painted the blue instead on top of that? I mean, what do I know? I don't make action figures for a living. Or do I? If you guys are interested, though, Many Faces is available right now. I know Entertainment Earth right now has it on a back order, but certainly if you guys are interested, I can put the link down below in the video description. That same link, by the way, BTW, will also save you 10%. Knock off 10% on anything that's currently in stock over on their site. It won't count for things that are on back order or on pre-orders, but anything that's currently in stock, yeah, you can knock off 10% right away. If you guys did enjoy this video, though, do it a solid, throw it a like. You guys want to stick around for more so? No, the video didn't cut off. I hope so. Hit that subscribe, turn on that bell, come back. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.